ॐ वर्णानामर्थसङ्घानां रसानां छन्दसामपि मङ्गलानां च कर्तारौ वन्दे वाणी विनायकौ श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां वागर्थाविव सम्पृक्तौ वागर्थप्रतिपत्तये जगतः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ. Namaste and good evening to all. It gives me great pleasure to speak in this Tantrotsav Satsang Mahashivratri Satsang series of Kalarigram. Thank you, Kalarigram, for inviting me this year as well to participate in this holy series. I think I have been speaking for the last 2 years in this series, and it's great that you bring these sessions on spirituality, devotion, and expounding the Shiva Tattva on the occasion of Shivaratri. It's a great thing. So, as the introducer mentioned, Shivananda Lahari is a stotra attributed to the great Shankaracharya. It has 100 verses full of spirituality, bhakti, jnana, and poetic beauty. So, we will just delve over a few of these verses and meditate upon their import and also enjoy the poetry in course of that. Next slide. Galanti Shambho Tvacharita Saritah Kilbisharajō Dalanti Dhikulya Saranishu Patanti Vijayatam Dishanti Samsara Brahmana Paritapopashamanam Vasanti Maccheto Hridabhuvi Shivananda Lahari. Oh Shambhu, may these waves of Shiva bliss, brimming from the river of thy holy stories, flowing into my mind lake through intellect canals, subduing the dust of sins and cooling the heat of misery, born of wanderings in samsara, be always victorious. This is the second verse of the text, Shivananda Lahari. Let's delve into its meaning now. The word Shivananda Lahari means waves of Shiva bliss. So it's billowing, brimming waves. So that actually means a flood. It is the flood of Shiva bliss that is being spoken here. And victory to that Shivananda Lahari, the Acharya first extols its glory. And what is it? So what is this flood of Shiva bliss? It is brimming with Tvacharita Saritaha, the great glories of Shiva, the contemplation on the Shiva Tattva. So that is the water that forms this flood. And this Shiva, this Shiva of bliss flood, it flows through the intellect canals of the devotee. See, in a normal Indian rural irrigation, we would have observed that there is a big river And then there are so many canals through which the river water flows, and it nourishes the fields, and it helps the householders, everyone. So, through the intellect canals of the devotees, this flood of Shiva bliss is flowing, and it is getting, it flows into this mind lake. So as they say, Manasa Sarovara. So the mind lake of the devotee. And what is its effect? It subdues the dust of all the sins, evil and papa. And as we know, when a flood flows, it washes out all the dirt. So in a similar way, this flood of Shiva bliss, it subdues the dust of all the sins. And water has a great cooling effect. So what does the Shiva bliss cool? It cools the heat of misery, born of samsara. Samsara, as we all are familiar, is this transmigratory existence of birth and death and rebirth and death, and all the sorrows. Not just the sorrows, even the pleasures in the samsara, they are also not permanent, and they always have the sorrow embedded in them. So all the sense pleasures that one person experiences in samsara, so eventually it leads to sorrow and dukkha and further vasanas and the samsara. So the heat, the excruciating heat of samsara, that the Shiva bliss cools down. So here the Acharya speaks of the glory of bhakti, the very experience of worshipping Shiva, thinking about Shiva, singing Shiva's glories, what effect it has. This is the effect. And Brahman, the supreme reality, as we know, is spoken of as Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Truth, auspiciousness, and beauty. So anything that has these qualities will always give fruits on the same lines. So the Sat Chid Ananda, so the truth, consciousness, and bliss. So the ultimate reality, Brahman, is nothing but the embodiment of these three, Sat Chit Ananda. And whoever locks his mind in the contemplation of Brahman will also be experiencing the effects of these qualities. So that's what is the glory of Shivananda Lahari. Let's move to the next slide. Deepaji. ज्वालोग्रः सकलामरातिभयदः क्ष्वेलः कथं वा त्वया दृष्टः किं च करे धृतः करतले किं पक्वजम्बूफलम् जिह्वायां निहितश्च सिद्धघुटिका वा कण्ठदेशे भृतः किं ते नीलमणिर्विभूषणमयं शंभो महात्मन् वद. O Shambhu, O Mahatman, pray tell, how did you look at that poison, flaming fiercely like fire, so terrifying to all the immortal devas even? And how did you take it and hold it in hand? Was it like a ripe jambu fruit to handle? How again did you place it on the tongue? Was it like a medicinal pill of the Siddhas? Pray, how wear it in the throat as if it was like a blue gem? This verse talks about Nilakantha. So this the Shiva's glories, one of the foremost Puranic metaphors and legends on Shiva is about this Nilakantha. So the painting that you saw in the slide, that was by Nandalal Bose. It completely captures the essence of this verse. So here, the devotee, as he is immersed in the glory of Shiva, he knows that Shiva drank poison. So he tries to visualize how did he drink poison? Shambho Mahatman Vada. Oh Shambhu, tell, how did you even drink it? So he asks, how was this? It was Kalakuta. It was like flaming fiercely like fire. And Sakala Amara Ati Bhayadaha. Devas are supposed to be Amaras, immortal. There is no death for them. And those Devas were running helter-skelter when this poison emerged from the milk ocean. So terrifying it was. And how did you take it and hold it? As if someone is just walking on the road. He picks up a ripe jambu fruit, just dusts it, keeps it in his palm, and then see, oh, how nice this jambu fruit is before eating it. Were you holding it like that? So how did you place it in the tongue? It is like one of those small pills, the sweetened pill that one casually puts in his mouth. Did you put it like that? And how did you wear it in your throat? So in the previous verse, the Acharya says, Nikshiptam garalam galena gilitam nodgirnamevatvaya. So when the Lord drank the poison, what did he do? He neither swallowed it. Why? Because it is said that all the jivas are within the body of the Lord. They are in its kukshi. They are in his womb. So he is Vishwagarbha. So if he had to protect all the beings that are within him, he cannot swallow it. If he spits out the poison, the beings outside, the Devas and Asuras who are churning the ocean, they will be affected. So what did he do? So he neither swallowed it nor spit it out. He just retained it in his throat and thus became Nilakantha. What great compassion, what great valor that Shiva has. So recounting this episode of Nilakantha itself is a great meditation. When we see picture of Shiva, the Nilakantha, with that black spot in his throat, so all these feelings, they emerge in our mind. That, oh, the Lord drank poison. And even with the poison in his throat, he is ever smiling. He is cool. And he simply doesn't even have any effect of that. He is wearing it as if it is like a blue gem. So meditating on this very form of Nilakantha makes us so compassionate, so brave, so courageous, and it gets us into this yogic state. So that's what is this meditation. Let's go to the next slide, Deepaji. Vakshastadana shankaya vichalito vaivasvato nirjaraha kotirojjvala ratnadeepa kalika nirajanam kurvate drishtva muktivadhu stanoti nibhrutashlesham bhavanipate yachetastava padapadma bhajanam tasyeha kim durlabham. Tasya iha kim durlabham. Nothing. What is there that is impossible to attain for him? Whose mind sings your lotus feet? Tava pada padma bhajanam. Bhavani pate, O consort of Bhavani. Even the god of death runs away, afraid of the kick in the chest. When Markandeya embraced that Shivalinga, when Yama was chasing him with his pasha, the rope of death, Shiva emerged instantaneously and he lifted his left leg to give a royal kick to Yama, that the Yama got terrified. He ran away, afraid of the kicks in the chest. So any devotee of Shiva, the Yama thinks twice, thrice, 4 times to even touch, because he remembers that kick in his chest. And then the lights shining in the jeweled crowns of the Devas, it shows the camphor light offering to the devotees, to the devotee. How? The devotee is always worshipping at the feet of Shiva. He is stuck to Shiva's feet. So all the Devas, they bow at Shiva's feet with their crowns. And those shining gems and jewels in the crowns of the Devas, their luster is such that they are doing a camphor light offering to the feet of Shiva, actually to the devotee who is locked to the feet of Shiva. So all the Devas, they adore the Shiva Bhakta. And then Mukti Vadhu, the pretty bride called Mukti, she folds him in tight embrace as soon as she sees him. For a Shiva Bhakta, the liberation is instant. It is Sadhyo Mukti. Once Shiva's grace is upon a Bhakta, the Mukti, the liberation, is symbolized here as a bride, a Vadhu. So, the bride running towards the groom the moment she sees him. So, a Shiva Bhakta doesn't have to make a great effort to get liberated. The bride of Mukti just comes running towards him. That is the glory of Shiva Bhakti. So what Acharya conveys in this verse, first, for a Shiva Bhakta, there is no fear of death. So this meditation on Mrityunjaya, or Mrityunjaya means one who conquered death, and Kala Kala means one who is death to the death himself. So Kala here actually means Yama and also time. And the time as a principle, always it represents the impermanence of things, the transitory nature of everything. So one who has transcended, who has gone beyond the transitory nature of everything, so he is Kala Kala, that is Shiva. So when we meditate on this aspect of Mrityunjaya, Kala Kala of Shiva, there is no fear of death. A Shiva Bhakta never fears for death or any calamity that is as horrendous or dangerous as death. So again, here the Veera aspect of Shiva Bhakta is spoken. And then he becomes supreme because even the Devas adore him. He attains a status that is equivalent to the Devas, or even a step above the Devas. And he doesn't have to make any extra effort for liberation, because the very attainment of Shiva's grace liberates him. So that is this verse. Let's move to the next one. अंकोलं निजबीज संततिर् अयस्कान्तो फलं सूचिका साध्वी नैज विभुं लताक्षितिरुहं सिन्धुः सरिद्वल्लभं प्राप्नोतीह यदा यथा तथा पशुपतेः पादारविन्दद्वयम् चेतो वृत्तिरूपेत्यतिष्ठति सदा सा भक्तिरित्युच्यते सा भक्तिरित्युच्यते. This verse gives a kind of definition for bhakti through metaphors. It's a great verse that requires some deep contemplation. So what are the metaphors? Ankolam nija bija santatihi. Like a real seed progeny reaches for the mother Ankola tree. This is a very exotic phenomenon in nature. This tree Ankola, you can see the photograph of the tree. It is called Arinjil in Tamil. The botanical name is, I have given it in the slides, Alangium hexapetalum. So there is an interesting quality for these trees. So when the fruits ripen in the tree, they fall to the ground and the fruit breaks, and as if through some mystery, the seeds just are pulled towards the trunk of the tree, and they just get stuck to the trunk of the tree, so they never get separated. Very strange phenomenon. So even when there is a great force of karmic bondage or vasana that separates the devotee from Ishvara, so through some mystery or some miracle, the bhakta always gets stuck to Ishvara. So that way, so this is one kind of relation, one kind of devotion between the Lord and the devotee. And the next one, like an iron needle reaches for the lodestone. I mean the lodestone, in the sense it is the magnetic attraction. That's what is. So the magnetic attraction is so natural. There is the iron needle and the magnet attract to each other as if it is their own nature, unless there is some other more powerful force that tries to pull them apart. But again, the mutual attraction happens. That is another kind of bonding. The third one, Sadhvi Naija Vibhum, like the chaste woman reaches for her Lord. So the woman loves her husband so much that even when there is a physical separation, when the husband travels out, she always keeps thinking about him. She longs for him. So that is a kind of longing. That's a form of bonding and relationship. The next one, Lata Kshikiruham, like a tender creeper reaches for the nearby trees. So a creeper always, it just withers away if there is no tree. So it is with the support of the tree alone the creeper survives. So it is that kind of intense feeling of love in which the devotee just can't live without the Lord. And the final one, Sindhu Sarid Vallabham, like the river reaches for the sea. So this is a very interesting metaphor of all. What does it mean when the river reaches the tree? So there is simply no separation between the river and the ocean. So the river, in a sense, realizes that, it flows into the sea and then they just become one. If the spirit of the mind reaches for the lotus feet of Pashupati and stays there always, then that state is called bhakti. So this is a great verse. So the first metaphor, where the seeds break and then get stuck to the trunk of the tree due to some punya in the previous birth or something. Even when it's something like an impossible event. How the seed, the seed getting separated from the mother tree is natural. But again, it coming and getting stuck to the tree, it's a mystery. And it's a miracle of nature. So that way, there are some people, whose mind, it gets that, it just like that fruit breaks open and the seeds scatter. So their mind, which is so much closed with vasanas and other desires, at some point just breaks and it gets attached to the Lord. So we have examples of such devotees in the Puranas. And then the magnetic attraction. So there are some people who have lot of sattva guna. So there is a natural attraction towards spirituality, devotion and everything. And once this devotion grows, it becomes like an intense, like a conjugal love between a husband and wife. And then it becomes like creeper and tree. And finally, that phenomenon, so that is like the Advaitic Bhakti. The Upanishad says, Yathanadya Syandamana Samudre Astam Gachanti Namarupe Vihaya Tatha Vidwan Namarupa Vimuktaha Paratparam Purusham Paiti Divyam. The rivers that merge into the sea, they lose their name and form. Astam Gachanti Nama Rupe Vihaya. In a similar way, an enlightened yogi, he dissolves his name and form and merges into the Supreme Brahman. So Sri Ramakrishna gives this example of a sugar doll, that gets dipped into that wants to get into a sugar syrup and wants to taste it and eventually merges with it inseparably. So in a similar way, the example of the salt doll is also given. So both, whether it is a sugary taste or the salty taste, the dissolving, the merging of the individuality into the absolute. So that is, so in through so many metaphors, the stages of bhakti is beautifully spoken in this verse. So contemplating this way, a devotee, it will be like a guidance for his sadhana and spiritual progress. Next slide. Now that we have seen some 4 verses, let's have some academic analysis of Shivananda Lahiri. So, Shivananda Lahiri is attributed to Bhagavan Shankaracharya, it is said. So, there is an academic opinion that, we know for sure that the Shankaracharya wrote bhashyas for the major Upanishads. He wrote bhashya for the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutra. So these 3 are like 3 jewels in the Advaita philosophy of Shankaracharya. And perhaps he also authored what is called Prakarana Grantha, the treatises on Vedanta philosophy, like Viveka Chudamani, Upadesha Sahasri, Atmabodha, Tattvabodha, etc. And all these stotras, perhaps he was not the author. It was someone wrote these stotras and then they attributed to him. There is this kind of academic opinion. It comes from a notion that the jnana and bhakti, they are mutually conflicting doctrines. Shankara is a great philosopher, great jnani. How can he write some very emotional stotra like this? It's not possible. But these notions come from very narrow understanding of Hindu spirituality and the Indian aesthetics and the Hindu darshana tradition itself. In fact, there have been a philosopher can very much be a great poet. Vyasa, for example, the author of Mahabharata, how do we classify him? A poet or a philosopher? He is like embodiment of all knowledge. The same thing can be said of Shankara too. And this text, Shivananda Lahiri, it's not just like some ordinary devotional hymn. We just saw the previous verse. So profound in its import. So it is a Uttama Stotra. So what is a Uttama Stotra? So the Lakshana of a Uttama Stotra is given like Namaskaras Tathashishcha, Siddhantoktif Parakramaha, Vibhutif Prarthana Cheti, Shadvidham Stotra Lakshana. So a stotra is not simply, praising the deity or the god. Oh, you are so great, like that. It's not just that. So that there are 6 qualities. Namaskaraha. Of course, it should offer salutations to the deities. Tata Ashihi. Ashishcha. So it should greet and extol. Jaya Jaya. That way. And then it should expound the Siddhanta of the deity. What? So, if it's a hymn on Shiva, the Shivananda Lahiri talks about Shiva Tattva and Parakramaha, the glories of the deity. Vibhutihi, the myriad forms of the deity. Prarthana, there should also be a prayer. So the 6 aspects, if they are there in a stotra, that is called Uttama Stotra. And of course, Shivananda Lahiri and also Saundarya Lahiri of Shankaracharya, they are Uttama Stotras. The stotra is a confluence of Advaita philosophy, Shiva Bhakti, and a sublime poetry in itself. The next slide. And then if we go by the traditional life story of Shankaracharya, there is a great connection between Shiva and Shankaracharya, so much that he is spoken as Shiva incarnate. The Totakacharya, a disciple of Shankara, in his Totakashtaka says, Bhavayeva Bhavaniti me nitaram. Oh Lord, you are Shiva himself. So of course, a disciple always thinks his guru as the embodiment of Ishvara himself. So you can, of course, we can say that. So because of his Guru Bhakti, he spoke that way. But there are also incidents which are there in this slide as pictures in Shankara's life that portray his connection with Shiva. So his parents, Shivaguru and Aryamba, they prayed intensely at the Shiva shrine at Trishur, the Vadakkunathan temple. And out of that prayer, Shankara was born. I mean, in the story, it is said that in a dream, Shiva came uh, and blessed both the parents that he himself will be born as their child, etc. And there is another famous incident about Manisha Panchakam, where a Chandala expounds the great Vedanta Advaitic wisdom to Shankara, and Shankara falls at his feet. And it is said that Shiva himself came in the form of Chandala and blessed Shankara. And there is another legend where Shankaracharya goes to Kailasa and he brings these great Shivalingas that are established, the Chandramaulishwara and other lingas established in sacred spots like Rameshwaram, etc. And it is said that Shankara attained to the heavens while in Kedarnath. When the disciples were seeing, he just ascended, he just walked and ascended to Kailasa. So there are these legends in Shankara's life that establish a deep connection between Shiva and Shankara. So it is very much, there is nothing surprising that Shankara composed this great hymn, Shivananda Lahari. So even, if you, so going by the language and the poetry, if someone argues that, oh, this cannot be Shankara's, the text certainly belongs to the Shankaracharya tradition. So maybe a disciple, a direct disciple of Shankara, or maybe 1 or 2 centuries after Shankara, someone in the same tradition composed this great hymn. So anyway, the connection between the Shivananda Lahari and Shankaracharya is indisputable in whatever way we talk about it. Let's continue our meditation. Ma gachat tvamitastato girishabho mayye pavasam kuru swamin adikiratama makamanah kantara simantare vartante bahusho mriga madajusho matsarya mohadayah tan hatva mrigaya vinodaruchita labham cha samprapsyasi. Oh, mountain dweller, Girisha, don't go here and there. Reside within me alone, O Lord. O Adi Kirata, the primeval hunter. You are a hunter and you want to do a lot of hunting, but don't take the trouble of going here and there. Stay within me. Why? In the dreary forest of my mind, there are many beasts of prey, like envy, delusion, matsarya, moha, and all this. There are beasts, wild beasts. You can kill them and then satisfy your fondness for the hunt. So here, this is a beautiful metaphor. We all know the Mahabharata story where Shiva came as a Kirata and fought with Arjuna in the Pashupatastra episode. And there is also some upasana of Shiva in the Kirata form, particularly in Kerala. So, he says, Adi Kirata, you are Adi Kirata, you are a primeval hunter. But come and hunt in my mind, which has these wild beasts. So here, the wild, uncontrollable, beastly nature of the mind. How can we tame it? So when we meditate upon this Kirata form of Shiva, we can pray to him to come and do his Kirata Leela within our wild mind, so that, the grace manifests as the hunting and the destruction of all those beastly qualities inside the mind, and the mind gets purified. So that is the meditation on the Kirata form. Next slide. So what if I am a very disciplined person, I have lot of sattva guna. I am not, my mind is not beastly or anything. So the next, can you go to the next slide, Deepaji? So this is the prayer of a noble and disciplined mind. Dhritistambhadharam dridaguna nibaddham sagamanam vichitram padmadhyam pratidivasa sanmarga ghatitam स्मरारे मच्चेत स्फुटपटकुटीं प्राप्य विशदां जयस्वामिन् शक्त्या सह शिवगणैः सेवित विभो. Here, the mind is spoken of as a tent, as a hut. Sputapatakuti. What kind of tent it is? It is spotless. It's a white tent house, pretty, lotus-shaped, mobile and crystal clean, and it has the will, the courageous will as the supporting pillar. It is supported by the ropes of determination. That the bhakta, he or she is so disciplined, noble and sattvic mind, ropes of determination. It is built daily anew. Pratidivasa sanmarga ghatitam. In the good spotless path only the tent travels. It doesn't go in any crooked ways. Sanmarga ghatitam. It always goes in the noble, right path. O Lord, please may this tent be occupied by you with Shakti. Smarare, destroyer of Manmatha. Vibho, all pervading one. You are ever served by your Ganas. Jayaswamin, victory to you. Come and reside in this sattvic mind. So you see here, the Acharya, here he talks about both kinds of minds, a wild mind as well as the discipled mind, and both kind of devotees, how they can meditate the Shiva Tattva. Next slide. Adya vidya hridgata nirgatasi vidya hridya hridgata tvatprasadat seve nityam shrikaram tvatpadabjam bhave muktir bhajanam rajamaule. So this verse, the jnana bhakti, how both are complementary and supportive to each other, that is brought out in this nice verse. O Rajamauli, the one with moon in his crown, the primeval ignorance, avidya, that used to live in my heart from the beginning of time has disappeared by your grace. And the knowledge, vidya, that is Shrikaram, that bestows all bliss, it is living there. And so I meditate on your lotus feet. So this gives only all good and grants salvation. It becomes greatly profitable. How else could it be? The one who meditates on Shiva, he becomes of Shiva nature. So the bhakti to Shiva brings jnana, and that makes one liberated. So that's what is brought out by this verse. So there is the next verse which says, Ashanam garalam phani kalapo vasanam charma cha vahanam mahokshaha mama dasyasi kim kimasti shambho tava padambuja bhakti meva dehi. Poison is your food, serpent your garland, elephant hide your garment, and a big ox your vehicle. See what kind of great things you have got. Poison is your food, ashanam garalam, phani kalapo, serpent is your garland, vasanam charma, the elephant hide, that's your garment, vahanam mahokshaha, a big old ox, nandi, that's your vehicle, Mama dasyasi kim? What then would you give me? Kim asti Shambho? Oh Shambho, what have you got to give? Tava padambuja bhakti meva dehi. Grant unto me only devotion to your lotus feet. See, this looks like a very satirical verse where the Acharya asks, so whatever you have got is nothing much is really useful. The poison, the snakes, the elephant hide, the old bull. So there is nothing that is materially useful with you. But you can, the one thing that you can give me is Tava Padambuja Bhakti Meva Dehi. Just give bhakti in your lotus feet. That is enough. So this is a meditation in which Shiva is considered as the king of renouncers, the Tyagaraja. Right? King of Swami Vivekananda calls Shiva as ascetics of ascetics, the king of ascetics. So he renounced everything. So whatever that is with Shiva is only these kind of things. So when we meditate Shiva in this form, the vairagya, the sense of asceticism, the sense of dispassion that grows in our mind. So that's what is this meditation. And then we come to the end of the talk. So this is the first verse, which is like a namaskara. So it's a great benedictory verse. So I put it last to end the talk. Kalabhyam Chudalankrita Shachikalabhyam Nijatapaf Phalabhyam Bhakteshu Prakatita Phalabhyam Bhavatu Me Shivabhyam Astoka Tribhuvana Shivabhyam Hridi Punar Bhavabhyam Anandas Phuradhanubhavabhyam Natiriyam Nama Shivabhyam says prostrations to Shiva and Shiva. So the Lord is called Shiva and Devi is called Shiva. So it's masculine and feminine gender of the same word. So this gives birth to 3 mantras. So one, as we all know, Namah Shivaya, that is to Shiva. Namah Shivayai, that is to Devi. And then Namah Shivabhyam. When you say Namah Shivabhyam, that means it is prostrations to Shiva as well as Shiva. So those who are familiar with the Sanskrit grammar, they will know Ramahara, like Ramabhyam, as the word comes. So Namah Shivabhyam. So that's a mantra in itself. So prostrations to Shiva and Shiva, how are they? Kalabhyam, they are embodiment of all arts. Chudalankrita Shashikalabhyam, in their matted crests, they are adorned with crescent moon. Nijatapaf Phalabhyam, they are personification of the fruits of mutual penance. See, Nijatapaf Phalabhyam is a very interesting phrase. So Shiva is the fruit of Parvati's penance and Parvati is the fruit of Shiva's penance. And they both of them are tapaswins. They are ever engaged in tapasya. So we know the Shiva Parvati famed story, right? The Parvati did penance to attain Shiva as husband. That is known. So those who are familiar with the story, Parvati was born as the son of Himavan. She goes and serves Shiva, right, who is doing tapasya. And that is when the Manmatha comes, shoots his arrows, disturbs and gets burnt and all that. So it's easy to, it is clear that Parvati was doing tapasya to get Shiva. What was Shiva doing tapasya for? That is not said in the Puranic stories. But he was doing tapasya to get Parvati. It is mutual penance. So that is what is Nija Tapah Phalabhyam, Bhakteshu Prakatita Phalabhyam. So both Shiva Parvati, they bestow on aspirants the fruits of devotional life, Tapah Phalabhyam. The fruits of their penances, they bestow. Astoka Tribhuvana Shivabhyam. So Shiva Parvati, they are the source of abounding good to all the three worlds. Hridi Punar Bhavabhyam. They reveal themselves in forms of ever renewing novelty. So every time you think of them, they appear in newer and newer forms. So those who are into meditation, and particularly the Saguna meditation, so the forms of divinity that we see in meditation, it is ever fresh, it never becomes stale. So ever renewing novelty. See, that is Hridi Punar Bhavabhyam. Every time they are born anew, their forms are ever fresh, ever newborn. Anandas Purad Anubhavabhyam. The experience of them generates supreme bliss in the minds contemplating on them. To such Shiva Parvati, I offer my prostrations. Natiriyam. That's how Shivananda Lahiri starts. And here we end our talk with that verse. So those who want to study Shivananda Lahiri, there is a beautiful English translation by Swami Tapasyananda. You can go to the archive.org website. You just search Shivananda Lahiri translation, you will get Swami Tapasyananda's. Those who know Tamil, there is a beautiful translation by Anna, which is published by Sri Ramakrishna Math, Chennai. It's a beautiful translation and commentary. You can study that. The 100 verses of Shivananda Lahiri are pure bliss, and it's a great experience of Shiva Bhakti and Shiva bliss, studying them and meditating on those verses. With that, I end my talk, and I thank Kalari Gram for giving me this opportunity to expound this great text. Thank you. Namaskar.